For the first panel, we have 4 people who have all been leaders in working to create and preserve good jobs for our communities in Silicon Valley. And let me begin with one of our panelists is Jim Bell. And I'm sure he's on his way in because I saw him in back a bit ago. He is? He's outside talking? All right. Well, it is election season, so we'll give him that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce him while he's walking in. In nearly 3 decades of public service, first as a San Jose City Council member, and then as a Santa Clara County Supervisor, and now as a State Assembly member, Jim Bell has left his mark on the face of this valley. He spurred the construction of Highway 85 and 87. He fought to bring BART to San Jose and authored bills to ease financing for seismic upgrades for our hospitals and also to grow California's solar industry. He has touched many lives up and down the state in his work to help foster children, low-income families, and families with disabilities. And in these very chambers, he led the drive to create the Children's Health Initiative so that every child in Santa Clara County could be covered by health insurance. Next, Carol Lee Hutton was named President and Chief Executive Officer of United Way Silicon Valley in February of 2008. Previously, she spent more than 30 years in the newspaper industry, most of it with the former Knight Ridder, where she was the last vice president for news. Carol Lee is on the board of the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, the steering committee for SJ 2020 initiative to close the ethnic and racial achievement gap in San Jose schools, and the School Link Services Implementation Oversight Committee. Welcome, Carol Lee. Neil Struthers has over 30 years in the construction industry. He began his career as an apprentice glazier and for the last 12 years has been the Chief Executive Officer of the Santa Clara and San Benito Counties Building and Construction Trades Council. Neil is also the Vice President of the State of California State Building Trades Council, the founder and chair of the Santa Clara County Construction Careers Association, a nonprofit of education and construction industry leaders that drive innovative programs and policies at both a local and national level. Welcome, Neil. Laverne Washington. Laverne Washington is a 45-year resident of the city of San Jose and began working for the city of San Jose's attorney's office as a legal assistant in 2000. She immediately became a member of her union, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, where she rose in the ranks from an activist to president of the Confidential Employees Organization chapter, to executive board member of AFSCME's Local 101 and Council 57. Laverne is a delegate for the South Bay Labor Council and a graduate of the Working Partnerships Leadership Institute. Welcome, Laverne. I'm going to start with Assemblymember Jim Bell.
Hi, everybody. This is the first time I've sat up here since I was a county supervisor, so it kind of feels, I feel pretty comfortable here. Maybe, it feels more comfortable than up in Sacramento, actually. But I'd like to thank you for inviting me to come and talk about our valley. And a lot of us still look at it as a valley. You know, it's the Valley of Heart's Delight. I grew up here in this valley, seeing the big changes, having lived here my entire life as a person, a family of 10 children going to San Jose State, picking prunes and apricots, doing that kind of stuff, working in the fields to pay my way through school. And one of the things I learned, I think it came from my work in agriculture, to be honest about it, because I worked in agriculture for about 12 years, is that morally I believe everyone who works hard deserves to have a decent living. I think if you ever worked in agriculture and see some of the conditions that people lived in that worked here in agriculture, and the lack of sanitation and good housing and decent places to live. You sort of have that, and it's not so much an intellectual feeling that people of my generation maybe have, but more of a gut feeling. And those of us that grow up here certainly have that. And we need to have more than mere subsistence in our lives, and that's why this conference is important. The middle class, of course, creating a stronger middle class is important in terms of moving to higher level incomes, education, having a healthier life because of good health care. You can't have good education, kids can't get through school. I was just passing out just now little stickers to all the kids at Blackford School for our Walk to School Day. We had Walk to School Day today, and we were giving all the kids stickers. A lot of the moms and dads walked with their kids to school. And I think those kinds of health issues are very important for our kids. And when all people of color, LGBT community, all the people attain a middle class status or can achieve a middle class status, we all benefit. And people's purchasing power increases, and then we can invest in education. We're going to be $1 million short, according to the PPIC, of college-educated workers in California by 2025. And we have to have a response to that, a strategy, protecting, expanding to make our state stronger and America stronger. And it's my belief that we should start and let everybody have a chance. And that's why the economic development policies are so important for creating jobs for people that are disadvantaged. And the state and the city and the county all have to have directives that accomplish that in a multitude of ways in terms of creating jobs and giving opportunities throughout our community. And that includes, for me, a special need of people with intellectual or physical disabilities. I've always been a champion of all people, giving all people an opportunity to have a chance at their dreams. So thank you.
You know, I worked for the private sector for about 10 years before I moved on to work for the public sector at San Jose. And I really, really wanted a job at San Jose because I thought, boy, that's the way that I'm going to get, good benefits. My wages are going to be comparable. There's some other, things that happen there. But, as I've worked at the city of San Jose, I realized that maybe it was not what I thought it was. So as I was looking at the topics today, I found that it was interesting that private sector employment gains have been steady since the end of our alleged recession in 2009. I'm not sure that recession has ended. And the private sector has actually increased by more than 5 million jobs, and that's just within the last 3 years. But at the same time, due to the fiscal conservative mantra that we all hear about austerity, and we've got to make sure that we get huge budget cuts, our federal, state, and local governments have had massive layoffs, pushing public sector jobs to their lowest level in 30 years. Since 2009, the public sector has eliminated over 600,000 jobs, and in July alone, this July, 9,000 government jobs were eliminated. This rapid reduction of public sector jobs has been the largest contributor of unemployment since the recession. The reduction of public sector jobs has had dire consequences for America's economic recovery. The Brookings Metro Monitor studied the largest 100 metropolitan areas in the U.S. Almost all of the top 20 strong economic performing metropolitan areas gained government jobs, while the lowest 20 economically performing metropolitan areas lost government jobs. The study leaves no doubt that the loss of public sector jobs will continue to be a drag on America's economy. So instead of being penny-wise and pound-foolish by shrinking our government, America should meet the needs of the communities for resources and services by increasing public service employment. The short-term consequences would translate into decreased unemployment for both public and private sector income, because there'd be income infused to increase consumption and sales revenue and speed America's economic recovery. By increasing the public sector employment, our government entities will be able to address the needs for infrastructure building and repair, provide adequate protective services, ensure the health of our population with state-of-the-art health services, effectively educate the next generation of workers and leaders, ensure accurate and effective testing, monitoring, and labeling of our water and food, not to mention maintain the beauty and sustainability of our parks, recreation facilities, and open space. By increasing government spending to meet the needs of the community with public sector growth, those public sector workers will cause an increase in the demand for goods and services, which will lead to the creation of more private sector jobs and income, and finally, a real economic recovery. So let's talk about how these public sector jobs can rebuild the middle class. The foundation of the middle class is good, decent wages and benefits, including health insurance and a defined benefit retirement plan, not that 401k savings that they're trying to sell you. It used to be that manufacturing jobs were the best route to be in the middle class, but employment in manufacturing has been substantially decreased through outsourcing to other countries. America's economy has moved from manufacturing to service-based, and with it, good-paying jobs. Most service sector jobs are low-paying, frequently paying a minimum wage that has not kept up with inflation and the needs of workers, which is why we need an increased minimum wage here in the Silicon Valley. And when you're working at a minimum wage job, those workers have very little chance of advancing to a position that will provide good wages and benefits. So, and another blow to the middle class is the technological revolution, which has resulted in the demise of blue-collar jobs, middle-class jobs, and substantially decreased the demand for white-collar jobs such as administrative support, bank tellers, computer programmers, and travel agents, careers that traditionally had good wages. So the base of the American economy has shifted, and so did the path to the middle class. The trend now is the acceleration to low-paid jobs. To stop that trend, we've got to go to the public sector. Public sector employees are employed in positions of providing or supporting essential services to the community we live in and we need. These public sector jobs compensate workers with decent, good wages and benefits. 36.2% of public sector employees are organized and represented by unions, which are able to negotiate and maintain the middle-class wages and benefits in working conditions despite the economic recession, while only 6.9% of private sector workers are unionized. I've been told I have to sort of move it up, but what I want to say to you, just as an ending note, is that we as Americans deserve an economy that does not participate in a race to the bottom, that squeezes the average person out of the middle class. Public sector jobs is one path for ensuring the continuation of America's middle class and the foundation of our economy.
And as Carol Lee gets ready to speak, I just wanted to remind people that if you have questions or comments that you want to make in this session, it would be good to start writing them down, because once Neil's done, we're going to open it up again for Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. So I'm the newcomer up here. I moved to San Jose about 7 years ago, and when I did, I thought I was coming to a place that basically was full of affluent, ambitious, and innovative people who basically lived under continuous sunshine. And I thought, wow, this is almost too good to be true. Well, flash forward a few years, and I joined United Way 4 years ago, and of course now I know it absolutely was too good to be true. It's not true. Yes, there's a lot of affluence here. I just read a report from the Chronicle of Philanthropy, which is kind of a national Bible in my sector, that said that San Jose anchors a metropolitan area that is 11th in the nation in discretionary income. That's 11th out of 366 metropolitan areas in the nation. 11th in discretionary income. But we know that that wealth, that discretionary income, is concentrated in a very small segment of the community. And we also know that that income is pushed up against some extraordinarily high expenses. When I got here, the cost of living really blew my mind. And I had an extraordinary advantage. I was relocated as a corporate executive in a Fortune 500 company. So believe me, I did not suffer the consequences of relocating to Silicon Valley. It took until I joined United Way until I really fully appreciated the gap, the inequalities here. But it hasn't taken that long to realize that this is a really tough place to make ends meet for too many people. There are too many people here. As you heard Bob discuss in the data, for those of you who are here for that presentation, they're making choices every month between groceries and rent, between prescription drugs if they're lucky enough to get a prescription, or the cost of transportation to get to school and work. Somehow, things like clothing and medication have become extras, when really we know they're essentials. Meanwhile, the job growth is concentrated in the very high and the very low areas, as you heard Bob say. And in those very low jobs, very low income jobs, far too many of those are minimum wage jobs. We know that there are more than 40,000 workers just in the city of San Jose making less than $10 an hour right now. Most of those are making minimum wage or something just around minimum wage. Minimum wage is $8 an hour. That's an annual income before tax of $16,640. And make no mistake, even those folks who know that they have access to the earned income tax credit still get that money taken out of their paycheck. They're not living on that money week to week, month to month. They have to go and file it correctly, and hopefully they're taking advantage of our VITA sites and our Earn It, Keep It, Save It program, and they're getting their taxes prepared for free. But that earned income tax credit comes later, after you've already endured a year having taxes pulled out of your paycheck. Even a single person with no children cannot live on $16,640 a year in Silicon Valley. Never mind the single mom who's trying to provide safe childcare and keep her kids fed and clothed. Never mind the young couple who's trying to work 2 jobs, support their children, and try to build a better life for them. And when you look in this community at the disproportionate impact of low and very low wage jobs on people of color, you see just how insidious it is. That's why we have to increase the minimum wage. It's fundamentally a moral imperative as well as an economic one. People who work hard and play by the rules deserve a fair wage. And $10 an hour is only a start. It's a beginning. It's a rung in that ladder that has so many rungs. There's plenty of research by very well-accredited major academic institutions that shows that the doomsday scenarios that have been put forth by the opponents of increasing the minimum wage are really nothing but empty threats. Businesses don't close, they don't flee the city, they don't fire their staffs when they're required to pay a fair wage. They pay. The truth is that an increase in a minimum wage would be spent here. The Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago did a study a few years ago that shows that every $1 of increase in the minimum wage of a worker results in $2,800 spent locally within the following year. $1 results in $2,800 spent locally. So increasing the minimum wage doesn't hurt our local businesses, it helps them. It helps our economy. These are not dollars that are going into mutual funds and offshore investments. They're going into grocery stores. They're going into food on the table tonight. The real doomsday scenario here is in the struggling working families in this community who cannot make ends meet and who are trying to support their families and to exist on minimum wage. It's already doomsday for those folks, and we know how to change that. We have got to give these people a chance. We have got to raise the minimum wage. Think D for dignity and vote yes on Measure D.
So, good morning. If there was any doubt about which way I was voting on minimum wage, I think you know the answer now after listening to Carol. So, my name is Neil Struthers. I'm the head of the building trades, and I'm going to talk about construction and construction jobs. Now, normally, giving just a thumbnail sketch of the construction industry takes 30, 45 minutes, an hour, and obviously I haven't been given that much time, so I'll be very quick and try to encapsulate some of this. But you can't talk about jobs in construction without talking about apprenticeship, because there are two different types of jobs in construction, and I'll get to that in a minute. There's low road jobs and there's high road jobs. And clearly the high road jobs involve apprenticeship. But I want to give you some statistics around the construction industry to try to frame your understanding of the construction industry. When I got into an apprenticeship at 18, I won't tell you how many years ago that was, but it was a number of decades ago, the average age of an apprentice, and an apprenticeship is at least 4 years in length, sometimes 5, the average age of an apprentice back then was 20 years old. That means we were getting people right out of high school into the apprenticeship programs. Today, that average age of an apprentice is 30 years old, so we lost a whole decade. That combined with the fact that the average age of people in the construction industry is in the mid to late 40s, and combine that with the fact that in the construction industry, which is very competitive, in which older workers are not necessarily protected as they are in other industries, even with collective bargaining agreements, that most people retire out of the construction industry in their early 50s. And so the current economy has masked what is a pending workforce shortage in our industry. A rising apprenticeship age, a mass exodus of existing workers, and this competition, low road competition in our industry. And there's some concerns, and the construction industry is at a crossroads, by and large, in which we can either take the high road or we can be forced down the low road. And there's plenty of people that want to force us down the low road, but the consequences of that are pretty significant. I think you've heard from Bob and from other people, and you'll hear later today that it's not just about creating jobs, it's about creating good jobs. Because if you don't create good jobs, you create jobs that still keep people in poverty. We all still pay the price to keep them out of poverty and keep them afloat. And so the construction industry is one of the few industries, I think if you think about it, along with healthcare, along with public sector jobs, along with education jobs, high tech obviously, but not all of us are working in high tech. Manufacturing, you're going to hear from Ro Khanna, is a challenge, but construction is one that's not easily outsourced. But I think there's significant challenges about what kind of jobs are created, and so everybody should have a concern, whether you're in the construction industry or not, what public and private owners, what kind of jobs are created on construction. And it is because of public policy that we have something called apprenticeship. And I want to give you some statistics around apprenticeship other than the average age. And one is that just in Santa Clara County, the private investment in job workforce training through apprenticeship is on average about $15 million a year. That's not public funds. Those are collectively bargained multi-employer funds that go into training, and that's just the budget. That's not capital improvements. That's just training on an annual basis. That's leveraged through public policy and a little bit of public monies. And that's important because if we're not creating skilled people in the construction industry, we start to look like other parts of the country, namely Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, where the prevailing rate, if there is one, for a construction worker is around $15 an hour. And once you get down to that point, most parents are not going to let their kids move into the construction industry. They're going to start to look at construction like they look at the agricultural industry and other service sector industries in this country where there's no way I'm going to let my child move into that industry. So when I say we're at a crossroads, we're starting to move in that direction, particularly in the residential market share, and that would be a travesty because these are jobs, if done correctly and if they're the right jobs, can create a middle class in this country, and at a time when people are struggling to figure out how we're going to do that. A lot of focus is on manufacturing, but we need to focus also on the jobs that are here and are not going anywhere and what kind of jobs they are. So there's a lot of information around this, but I do think there are ways to address this. There's, as I say, even though we're at a crossroads, there's ways to, there's good news here, and that is through collaboration, through education, through the nonprofit we started. We are working more creatively with high school and middle schools about how to get in the construction industry because, as you know, there is no more shop classes by and large, and that's one of the reasons why we have this rise in the average age of an apprentice, but also public policy. You know, I think there's been a dialogue with people in this room and other people are interested in how we create more good local jobs for people in our community. And one of the, you know, dirty little secrets in construction is that even though local bond dollars are paying for local libraries and police stations and airports and et cetera, you know, without the proper public policy in place, a lot of these jobs are not local jobs. In fact, some of the cases is less than 50% of the workforce on these public projects funded by the local community have local workers on them. And so those local dollars are now circulating in other parts of the state and in some cases other states when they could in fact be recirculated and create a bigger bang for our buck here in our local economy, but it's not happening. And so I think there's ways through public policy, through leadership of Assemblymember Bell and other people to make these things happen. So I hope to answer those questions and give you a little bit more information about how our industry works, but it's a very complex industry that, you know, left unregulated would race to the bottom overnight, and it would be a travesty for our economy locally and nationally. Thank you.
I want to thank our panel and with their very broad experience bringing a lot of really important information. I also just want to emphasize as you write your questions that I need a new eyeglass prescription, so write big and clear. And I apologize if I mess up your questions. We have quite a few, so I'm going to ask folks if they could. I'm going to direct some of them just to get us started. What are the manufacturing jobs in Silicon Valley besides those related to the high tech or to the electronics industry? Does anybody know that?
Yeah, I know that a lot of the manufacturing jobs are a result of new inventive patents, and people are creating patents, and then the patents create jobs, and we're starting to see a lot of small and medium-sized businesses actually get into manufacturing here in Silicon Valley. You know, a lot of people think the big companies. Well, a lot of the real manufacturing is the small, medium companies. So we have to realize that growing those companies and giving them an opportunity to grow here without moving away. A lot of the typical kinds of things you hear is, okay, they achieve a certain size and then the companies move to some other place. But I think allowing those companies to grow here and stay here. We have, you know, the light bulb company, Philips, is making light bulbs here. I don't know if you knew that. There's like 400 jobs in that company. We have, of course, we have a lot of solar companies, Nano Solar. They're making that high-tech solar energy panels here. It's actually cheaper for them to do it here than to do it overseas. So they're doing it here. The companies that find it easier to do it here are a lot of those kinds of companies. So and the growth in manufacturing is occurring. It is occurring.
Did you want to add something, Kelly? Thank you.
I think, you know, if you're not in tech, in high tech in this area, you get overlooked. And there are manufacturers. You know, Kellogg's makes Eggo waffles here. You should all eat them because Kellogg's makes them here. But you know, there are things like that take place here. They're just not the dominant industry, and I think it's worth knowing that because those are good jobs.
In a Victorian gown economy, it seems that the issue is not only income disparity, but asset disparity. And how do you increase the assets of low-income families? And I'll go to you, Carolee.
Asset building is such a critical problem. How can you say to somebody you need to save when you don't have enough money to put food on the table tonight? So, you know, I would love to think that this increase in the minimum wage, which I'm optimistic will be approved, will result in increased savings, but I think that's naive without policies and programs that help match savings, that help create savings. You know, the Opportunity Fund, a nonprofit here in San Jose, has extremely successful programs helping people with micro loans and with match savings. Those kinds of programs really are the future. You cannot save on a very low wage income. It's just not possible. The expenses just don't allow it.
There are currently about a dozen cranes in downtown San Francisco and none in downtown San Jose. San Francisco is known as a strong, union, labor-friendly, pension reform-passing city. Could San Jose's no crane scenario be indicative of what happens when entities such as government, labor, and businesses don't work together?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll answer that one. Neil can probably comment. I was on the council, the city council, when we built the convention center, the arena, the Fairmont Hotel, all those projects. We had project labor agreements. We had agreements to have labor peace. We had agreements on all that. And I think I don't know who wrote this. Adam Smith said, the economist the conservatives always quote, if you create certainty, economic activity will thus sprue forth, right? Isn't that what he said? So I think what we did is we created an environment to allow that construction, and we had those public projects that stimulated the private projects, the investments in buildings with the help of redevelopment funds. So I think those projects that occurred during that era and the investments, the private investment that occurred, was due to creating a stable platform in the community of labor peace, plenty of workers, support, pretty much unanimous support on the city council. And that's kind of how the city council in the 80s and 90s had all those wonderful projects that we think, oh, they're all great now, but it wasn't an easy thing to do. And Neil can comment on that too.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you drive by, if you go by Santa Clara, you'll see all kinds of cranes. That's not in San Jose, it's not downtown. But I will tell you that after 4 years of almost 40% at times unemployment in the construction industry, we are starting to get back to normal in the Bay Area and in the South Bay in particular. And I talked to my colleagues around the state and around the country, and this is more of an anomaly. The last time the economy picked up, we all kind of picked up together, but it appears that the majority of construction going on in the state of California is happening in the Bay Area, and in particular in the South Bay, to the point where we'll have full employment by this time next year. So we're starting to run new apprenticeship classes. We may be in a situation where, we may need to bring skilled workers from other parts of the state. Unfortunately, we like to have that graph instead of going, peaks and valleys to be more gradual, but that's not how it works in our industry. High tech is driving a lot of that. There's Apple, there's Google, there's Facebook, there's the 49ers, there's public investment, there's in the form of transportation, federal dollars coming here. So I would say that it's going to look a lot different this time next year related to construction, and the economy is, if we're the canary in the coal mine, it's looking better. So I would say that, we're not San Francisco, but I'd say there's more work going on in the South Bay than San Francisco, and it has been for some time.
I'd also like to add to that, San Jose has bought into the mantra of budget cuts and austerity. They've got infrastructure problems, tremendous infrastructure problems, but our city council has been putting Band-Aids on it instead of working towards building up our infrastructure, changing our infrastructure, modernizing our infrastructure. San Jose and their budget cuts have simply been saying, we're going to put a Band-Aid on it and hope that it doesn't break. And that's sort of what they've done here as a community, as citizens, as residents. We need to demand that the city of San Jose take our taxpayer dollars and improve our city's infrastructure, improve our city's investment in our community. Instead of cutting things like police officers, cutting, water pollution control plant operators, not making sure that we have the potholes fixed. Instead of doing this, instead of saying in San Jose that we don't have the budget to do it, tell them find the budget to do it, invest in our city, and when you invest in our city, your citizens will invest in you.
So this one is for Neil. What jobs and internships do you offer Eastside Union High School students on high school campuses for credit or experience? And then this is a complicated question, and but I mean, not a complicated question, I'm sorry. You just have a lot of them, so I'm going to break them down to two. What are you doing to hire and bring in more people of color into the trades, both in labor and upper management?
Okay, so let me, if I forget all the questions, you'll remind me. But so one of the things we did, we started in 2003, and this when the school districts were starting to pass a number of modernization bonds, and we went to the school districts and said, look, it's, you can do more than create new classrooms and a new learning environment. You should leverage opportunity for your students. And so we put together a construction careers agreement, which is, it's a project labor agreement with an added component that provides opportunities for students. And we took a shuttered wood shop at Yerba Buena High School and turned it into a full-blown construction careers academy. It's now integrated with their engineering department. It's in a California Partnership Academy, and we've been able to leverage hundreds of thousands of dollars for those through Prop 1B bonds, and through our nonprofit, the Santa Clara Construction Careers Association, have leveraged over $2 million for various programs related to the construction industry and education with community colleges, Eastside, Alum Rock, and a number of other school districts. So every year we put 20 students into internships within the construction industry. And recently we've started to do something else called teacher internships, where we take teachers in the middle schools and in the high schools and put them through a week-long internship so that they can see what the industry is doing. And from that, put together lesson plans in their classroom that integrates the construction industry into their math and science curriculum to give relevance to those students. Because what we found, well, we didn't find it, but education found, and I think the community knows, that the prediction, you can predict whether students can complete high school by their 8th grade math proficiency, and some people are telling me it's now 6th grade. And I think a lot of students who get frustrated in math decide, I don't need to know this because I'm not going to be an engineer, I'm not going to go to college, I'm going to go be a carpenter, I'm going to be an electrician, I'm going to be a plumber. And we need to instill in them that you're not going to be a carpenter, a plumber, electrician unless you graduate high school and are proficient in math. So there's a lot of things we're doing around that. Eastside was the first place we started, but we haven't stopped there, and we're in dialogue with a number of other school districts to do something similar. We know they don't have the resources to create a shop class in every high school or every middle school, but we work with them to complement what they are doing.
Thank you. And then the second question was about how you're working to get more people of color into these positions.
Right. Well, first of all, the ethnic breakdown of apprenticeship is the majority of apprentices in the state of California, and I would say that in it's a little bit different in Santa Clara County, but the majority of ethnicity in the apprenticeship program statewide is minority, both Latino, African American, Asian, and in Santa Clara County, it's probably 60% Latino in the apprenticeship programs. Now, having said that, we need to do a better job of getting women into the trades. Women represent less than 2%, I believe, of those represented in the trades. We know there's a difficulty in doing that. There's been a lot of work there. And we needed to, we need to do a better job, I think, of bringing in people of color, even though I think African Americans and Latinos are overrepresented based on the population in Santa Clara County in our programs. We need to do better. And one of the things we're talking about is public policy. How do we take public works projects, work with people in the community, CBOs, other interested parties, and provide opportunity onto those public works projects through direct entry into apprenticeship? It's a complicated matter, more than we have time for here, but there is dialogue going on with affected parties in this community about how we do that, how we come together and, approach public policymakers and say, we need you to do better to create local jobs and to create a pathway for people in our communities who want to get into construction, who want a career path, and to do that. Because as I said earlier, if we look at the data, and Working Partnerships has been running some of this data, that not everybody working on these public works projects in our communities are from our community. And we need to start there in public works and make sure that people in our community are working on those projects. And we have a plan to do that. It's not simple, and it requires, some boldness by our elected officials to do it.
And we have just a couple minutes left of questions, and we had a lot of questions, so I want to just direct these last two, one to Carol Lee and then the other to Assemblymember Bell. Nearly 2/3 of the minimum wage workers that Ms. Hutton and Ms. Washington touched on are women. And the question is, in our public policy, how can we reframe discussions so that panelists and other leaders are vocal champions for women? Investments in women are excellent for our whole community.
Well, that's an unfortunate truth. I mean, you just heard Neil say that women represent 2% of the trades, so big surprise. We know that there's an extraordinarily disproportionate representation of single moms among folks who do not live at self-sufficiency. In fact, who live all the way down at what the federal government considers poverty, which is a ridiculous standard for Silicon Valley. Those absolutely are public policy matters. There clearly are, the potential. There's clearly a potential for women in this market to be engaged in better job training. This is something that has to be a cooperative endeavor by government, by the nonprofit sector, by the building trades, by labor in general. It doesn't happen. Nothing happens when one sector says, oh, let's work on that. It has to be done cooperatively. I'd go a step further and say, in response to Neil's comment a few minutes ago that because of the construction boom in the South Bay, we may need to import skilled labor, I would say that government and nonprofits and the skilled trades and the labor unions need to make a pact, need to sign in blood and say, every eligible, trainable worker in Santa Clara County will be trained and employed first before we import labor from elsewhere, because we have a labor pool here we need to put to work, and we keep stepping over them and bringing people from elsewhere around the world to do the good wage jobs in this community. That has disproportionately affected women. It has disproportionately affected people of color. It's solvable, but we need a coalition, and I'm in if you are. Neil.
I wholeheartedly agree, and we'll start working on it right after this.
Sure.
So I'd like to add something to that. I think that some of the reasons that we don't see women in some of these jobs is the working conditions that they are subjected to. Women in particular, women with children, they need to have good benefits. They need to have sick leave, vacation leave. They need to have an area where they can leave and take their children to school, or where they can have a babysitter agreement. These are things that you will find in some of the public sector jobs where there are benefits that will particularly make it easier for women to go to work, to stay to work, and to continue to make good wages.
Great, thank you. Laverne.
I think we may see this issue come up tonight in the debate, okay? With Romney attacking President Obama on the so-called worker requirement for CalWORKs. CalWORKs, and I chair the committee in the Assembly that deals with CalWORKs. I think CalWORKs has to be a little bit restructured, and we tried under Governor Schwarzenegger, and that didn't work, so we're going to continue to try under Governor Brown. CalWORKs is about 1.5 million people. About 2/3 of them are children. When we say this 1.5 million, who are these people? Well, they're kids, and then their families, mainly women, adults. So it's mainly women with children, CalWORKs. About 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4, something like that. It varies from year to year, of the families are headed by women, okay? So I think things like the construction college, the work of the community college can play a big role. The apprenticeship programs can play a big role in getting more women into those jobs. You have to have child care. If you don't have child care, you can't get a stable environment to continue on and proceed and advance in the job. So the CalWORKs program tied to the budget of child care, and that's why we fought like crazy this year to preserve the child care and the CalWORKs programs. And we have to remember that if we don't do that, these people become homeless. And isn't that a disaster, having women and children in our homeless shelters. We can go to programs like subsidized employment programs as a public policy. We ought to start talking about that. And then, of course, the most important parameter is how much money does it take to take care of a child with child care for women without increasing the minimum wage. It's a ludicrous proposition to keep the minimum wage where it is in this county. If you have a heart that is red, you will vote for the measure. If you have a heart that is blue, that blood doesn't flow through your heart, you're not going to vote for it. But if you have a heart that you know that anybody that has a child that is paid $8 an hour can't take care of that kid and can't take care of those kids and putting them at a risk of homeless, you know that that is a moral travesty. So you ought to consider the moral elements of that when you go and vote, and you got to support the minimum wage increase.
I want to thank the panel. Give them a big round of applause. Bigger than that, thank you, panel.